It broke down on the way to work today. We think the diesel fuel gelled at 21 below, and driving about 40, 50 miles an hour, you get down to 50 below. So I guess that was enough of that.
Apparently you made it back home, looks like.
Yeah, barely.
Commissioner O'Donnell, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Welcome all. I will open this regular meeting of the Montana Public Service Commission. The date is December the 20th, 2022. The time is 9:32 a.m. and we are in the Bollinger Room in the office of the Montana Public Service Commission in Helena, Montana. Begin by asking all of you to rise and join in pledge of allegiance to the flag. Thank you all. For the record, in the Bollinger Room, President Brown and myself. Joining us remotely are Commissioners Pinocci, O'Donnell, and Fielder. So a quorum is in fact in place. Begin now with public comment. And we have, I believe, one in-room public commenter, Ms. Heim.
Thank you very much, Chairman Johnson, Commissioners. Good morning. My name is Shannon Heim. I'm the Director of Regulatory Counsel at Northwestern Energy, and I'm here this morning to offer brief comments on docket 2021.01.007, which are the supply planning rules that are on your agenda today. Northwestern appreciates all of the effort made by staff and the investment of resources by all of the stakeholders, even those we don't see quite eye to eye with. to develop these rules. A lot of work has gone into it, a lot of time, and we think it was an important effort. As we sit here, the temperature is approaching record lows across Montana. No situation could better illustrate why these rules are so important to Northwestern and MDU, and why we must be able to adequately plan our resources to meet challenging loads like we're currently experiencing. Utilities must have dispatchable resources to meet these heavy loads, or the state and its citizens face unacceptable consequences. Northwestern has offered substantial comments in this docket over the last couple of years, and I won't reiterate them now. We continue to be concerned that the proposed rules create a process that will take longer, cost more, and produce less flexible outcomes. I'd like to highlight 3 specific issues that can continue to cause specific concern. First, the current rules allow ETAC, which is the advisory committee to the utility, to influence the selection of the RFP administrator and the scoring criteria. We recognize and appreciate the role that the committee plays, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a very defined role for the utility, and because it is the utility's process. There is a significant public process to develop guidelines for the selection of the administrator, but at the end of the day, it is the utility's work and the utility's function that administrator is guiding. This item in particular allocates control of the utility to self-interested stakeholders at a time that is potentially problematic. And so we continue to have concerns. Secondly, the requirement that a utility must model resources based on all transmission requirements imposes an incredible burden on the utility, given the number of potential variables. It's unlikely, in our opinion, to yield meaningful data while adding substantial time and expense to the process. Finally, Northwestern remains concerned about the provisions in the rules requiring Northwestern to basically teach the test rather than to allow all bidders to compete on an even playing field. Requiring detailed analysis about how to maximize a score on the matrix within a competitive solicitation allows gaming of the system and defies the concept of a free market. We just think that particular provision goes farther than is useful to the utility or our customers. A lot of work has gone into these rules, and we really appreciate everything that staff has been through, all of the ups and downs of the process. This has definitely been sausage making for all of us at its best. But Northwestern remains committed to providing safe and reliable service at an affordable price. These rules are intended to guide that process and to help us do our job. The commission's role is to oversee the process, so we would encourage you, as you implement these rules, not to micromanage it. We look forward to working with the commission and the staff in the implementation process. We all recognize that writing the rules is only the first step. Now we have to put them into place and make them work for the utility and our customers and the state of Montana. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heim. We now have a number of online commenters. First is Sergey Konev. Have Mr. Konev online?
Hello, good morning. Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to comment on Aquanet Inc. 2022.09.085. I'm a resident of that neighborhood. What the issue is happening is the Aquanet Inc. that services and maintains and owns the water and sewer system in the neighborhood. Since the inception, it has failed to properly maintain it. And they're currently attempting to drastically raise the rate, which I particularly maybe perhaps don't have big problem with the rate increase, as I know they haven't increased it in years. But my issue is during this time, I believe they use their financials to back up the expenses for the last 10 years or however long they've been operating. But based on our agreements, they have reduced the services as they now refuse to maintain the individual tanks at houses and the water wells. So basically, there's a large reduction of service, yet the fee is being increased drastically. So if those costs were captured in the prior financials for the maintenance of the individual tanks and water wells that are no longer going to be serviced, which would be, I believe, another breach of contract between the neighborhood and Aquanet, as there was no amended agreement signed by either of the parties to reduce the services. That would change the calculation of the interim rate and forward indexing of the base rate. Also, my concern is if they go towards the PSC regulated tariff on this system, what state oversight will be of this system if there's going to be any enforcement to Aquanet for their services in return for the tariff that we pay for this for the use of this utility. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Konev. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
And the next commenter is Spencer Gray with NIPSI. Mr. Gray, are you with us?
Hi there, Vice President Johnson. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Welcome.
Great. Thank you for holding this important meeting today. I'm Spencer Gray, the Executive Director of the Northwest and Intermountain Power Producers Coalition, and I'm providing comments in 2021.01.007, the revised draft rules for implementation of House Bill 597. NIPSI is a trade association of independent power producers with all kinds of power plants across the Pacific Northwest and the Intermountain West. And I just want to say that from our perspective, we appreciate the hard work of the commission staff, and the many stakeholders in this docket. We've gone through, as the commission knows, 2 years of multiple rounds of rule drafting, public comments, and revisions. The staff memo in front of the commission provides, I think, a quite thorough response to a range of stakeholder comments, including NIPSI's. And just at a high level, NIPSI urges the commission to adopt the revised rules as laid out in the draft notice. In our experience, and as we described in some detail in our filings in this docket, the revisions proposed to competitive procurement in Montana will lead to an improvement in competition in the state. We believe the rules as revised will result in more independent power producers bidding into solicitations for power in Montana. They will increase confidence that there is a level playing field in the state. And I say this from the perspective of not having all of our recommendations adopted. They're not the rules that NIPSI by itself would have drafted, and that's appropriate. The commission and staff balanced a range of views on how to ensure competition, how to implement HB 597 appropriately in these revised draft rules. And I want to underscore that in our experience, if these are adopted, Montana will continue to have perhaps the lightest touch from a commission in overseeing and requiring specific standards for competitive procurement of really any state in the region. I think our comments spoke to that over several rounds of filings. So in summary, we appreciate some of the targeted changes made in response to stakeholders after the August hearing, and urge the commission to adopt this revised draft. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Next commenter is Trevor Schilling. Mr. Schilling.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you. I'm online here to comment regarding the Aquanet rate increase, the docket number 2209.085. I am the current HOA president for the subdivision, and I just wanted to provide somewhat of a history regarding our subdivision. Our subdivision is located out here in Yellowstone County. We are kind of a rural subdivision. We do not have any public water service and or public sewer service. So at the time the subdivision was developed and built was built in accordance with the Yellowstone County subdivision regulations. And during the process at that time, the county recognized that there was no public water and or public sewer system out here. So at which point in time, they referenced in the SIA, which is called the subdivision improvement agreement, which holds accountability to the subdivider, that this system was to be provided. And what the system consists of is on each lot, there's 92 homes out here. Each lot contains a septic tank. So you have one part of a holding tank, a two-part holding tank, at which point in time, the gray water, for lack of a better term, gets pumped over to the community drain field. The community drain field is located in Yellowstone County Park Ground. And that is our system each for wastewater. The water system is comprised of private wells. So there's one well that serves 2 homes for each lot. During that process, a company by the name of Aquanet was named in the SIA. And it clearly stated in that SIA that Aquanet shall be the installer and the maintenance provider for said systems. At which point in time, it was a covenants then was required that outlined ownership as well as the required maintenance for these systems. I believe the commission should have a copy of those documents that I provided, as well as some public letters that were given to Aquanet over the past couple of years to the homeowners. And so as the previous commenter had mentioned, Aquanet has tried to double their rates as well as reduce the services. As the letters that I have provided you guys, it shows that in 12/16 of 19 letter, he showed that he needed to increase his rate of $155. That never came to fruition. At that point in time, I believe the Public Service Commission got involved. And it was my understanding that Aquanet was approved to provide the standard rate of $80 a month. That was Aquanet's explanation to the homeowners that was what was previously allowed by law without going through a full case review. At which point in time, a year passed by, and then Aquanet provided another letter stating that they will now turn over all the tanks on the property, and that would then become the responsibility of the homeowner. At which point in time, they guaranteed that they would pump out the tanks, provide pictures, documentation showing that had been done. To my knowledge, all 92 lots have not been done. And actually, there was some lots, speaking to some homeowners, that some of those had not been pumped in the five years that they had lived there. Aquanet had talked about in those letters that he wants to turn the system over to the HOA. As you guys well are aware that if a HOA type entity owns their own system, they do not have to abide by the Public Service Commission's rate tariff rules. The problem being with the HOA is the HOA has gone through many ups and downs. The biggest hurdle was the HOA was not a current registered with the state. That has been currently rectified. New members have been elected, and we have established an EIN in hopes to maybe regulate our own system. We've come across many hurdles. One of the major hurdles is getting insurance, not only to protect the HOA, to protect the system. So that's been the major hurdle. We had a meeting with Aquanet Dan Wells and Tabitha. She is one of the other main people there. And we expressed our concerns. And we also had told them that, it's unknown if we as a HOA can actually afford to do this ourselves, since we're nothing more than a bunch of homeowners trying to regulate or try to manage a system of such of this capacity. At which point in time, Mr. Wells had stated that if the rate that they choose is not paid, or the HOA did not take over the system, that Aquanet would just simply not pay its bills and close the doors. And then therefore we would have 92 homes in this subdivision in Yellowstone County without water and without sewer systems, which would be a huge detriment to Yellowstone County as well. So I urge that the PSC take a deep look into Aquanet and its past history with the subdivision, as well as take a deep look into the SIA and the other documents that mandate that Aquanet be the sole provider for the systems and how they maintain it. So I would urge the commission to push this on to a full rate case review. And I appreciate you guys' time. And that's all for now.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Appreciate you being with us. Next commenter is Mr. James Somas. Mr. Somas.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to address you gentlemen, or as a committee today. I'm commenting on 2022.09.085 Aquanet and Lindley Lakes. Again, after Trevor just provided a pretty detailed history of what's been going on here, I've been a resident out here since 2016. I also participated in some of the early on discussions with Aquanet, trying to, when the discussion first became evident that they wanted to turn it over to the homeowners. It's been a very troubling process. One, we requested a lot of information, which was never provided. And we would go 6-8 months without even hearing anything back from Aquanet, so the process has been very difficult from the beginning. I'm here to register my complaint about a 75% increase in the monthly fee, going from $80 per month to $140 per month, and also then reducing the services significantly. I just have a real issue with that. Again, I think, as it was stated before, I think the residents here can understand that there needs to be some type of a rate increase. And we don't have a problem with that. It's just that now you increase it by 75% and then reduce the services. It seems difficult to try to comprehend, as a homeowner out here, and what the long lasting effects might be, especially on our property values. I won't take any more of your time because I feel like Trevor really explained things out really well, and I just want to make sure I register my thoughts. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for being with us. Now we have, I believe, Senator-elect Daniel Zolnikoff on the line.
Good morning, commissioners. This is Daniel Zolnikoff. Thank you, Vice President Johnson. I wanted to say that I support the rules as is, and I'm asking the commission to support these rules. The weighted matrix is the standard for RFPs and allows bidders to understand the importance of the aspects of the utilities needs by how they are weighted. This clarifies the wants versus the needs of the utilities, so the bidders are not attempting to compete blind and guess what aspects of the utilities needs are most important versus least important. The projects can be adjusted to ensure these most important aspects of the utilities needs are met by the bidder. And this is not gaming the system, it's just clear transparency that allows bidders to understand how to meet the needs and bid appropriately. The purpose of the law was to allow for a more transparent, competitive, and trusted process, and I believe that these rules do just that. And I appreciate the effort of the commission to create these rules, and am asking that the commission support these rules today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zolnikoff. Appreciate you being with us. Do we have any other public comment? Anyone else in the room wish to offer public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the agenda. Before we begin, let me announce that by virtue of a commissioner request, work session item number 2, Aquanet, is going to be deferred until the January 3rd meeting. So there will not be action on agenda item number 2. With that, now we can move on to action items. Item number 1 is approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the commission minutes for the week of December 5th, 2022.
Thank you, President Brown. Is there a second?
I will second the motion.
Been moved and seconded, and we approve those minutes as distributed. Are there additions or changes to the minutes? The additions or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The minutes are approved. Moving now to work session item number 1 in docket 2021.01.007 in regard to implementation of rules for HB 597. And Ms. Goldberg, I believe you're going to lead off.
Good morning, Chair Johnson and Commissioners. Today's work session is regarding the House Bill 597 rulemaking. The Commission may recall an amended notice was published in early November to provide additional stakeholder input. That comment period has passed and staff has reviewed the comments received. Minor language was adjusted for clarity in a couple instances, and the definition of affiliate was revised using language from another Commission rule. But otherwise, the rules remain unchanged since presented to the Commission in September. The draft notice of adoption and repeal for your consideration today, in staff's opinion, implements the statute to the fullest extent possible. The proposed rules inject trust and transparency into the resource planning and procurement processes. The rules bring Montana in line with industry best practices and our neighbors, Idaho and Utah, who use similar RFP rules, which will be important as our subregion works together to address resource adequacy moving forward. Nothing in the proposed rules precludes a utility from pursuing an opportunity resource. Rather, the rules look to provide the proper regulatory incentive to ensure utility resource planning and procurement processes and outcomes serve the public interest at the lowest long-term cost. And so there seems to be a little bit of confusion. So I do want to clarify that these rules are still the rules that received bipartisan support from the ETIC committee in September. And then I would also like to note that the ETAC, the Advisory Committee for Utilities, is a utility designated member. So the utility has they designate the members, and while the Advisory Committee provides technical advice, it is still the utility who ultimately will make its decisions. So I did want to clarify that. And also, as we've heard, providing scoring matrices and bidding information injects transparency into the RFP process and is an industry standard, not just in our region, but across the country. So with that, staff would recommend approval of the draft notice of adoption and repeal, and to allow staff to make non-substantive changes for clarity and formatting purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg. Mr. Hamilton, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Mr. Rosequist. The chair would entertain a motion. President Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the draft notice and authorize staff to make non-substantive changes to the rules for clarity and formatting purposes.
Is there a second to the motion? I will second the motion. It has been moved and seconded. We approve staff recommendation in this docket. Discussion of the motion. President Brown, would you like to open?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman is aware, I was comfortable with the notice of adoption and or I was comfortable with the version of the rules that were up for consideration in September. I believe that the commission has responded correctly and thoroughly to the comments that were made at the prior commission consideration of these draft rules in September 13th. We've certainly accorded all parties significant process and opportunity to comment on these rules, so I have no concerns regarding public comment. I also believe, as was stated by the bill sponsor, Mr. Zolnikov, that these rules as currently drafted do meet the legislature's intent in giving us the authority to do rulemaking on these rules. So I'll be supporting my own motion. I do have a question though, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Hamilton, if may.
Please proceed.
Mr. Hamilton, you are aware of legislation that was passed in the 2021 session, I believe, that prohibits agencies, which would include the Montana Public Service Commission, from promulgating rules during a cooling off period. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, I am aware of the legislation you're referring to.
Are we, by moving forward today, if we choose to do so or vote to do so, in violation of that legislation?
Mr. Chair, Mr. President, it's a great question. I would say no. The staff would not be in a position to submit this to the Secretary of State's office for publication until the cooling off period is expired. So we'll be looking at publishing this in the new year, which will be the formal adoption of the rule.
So it is your opinion and advice that by formally adopting, if you will, if we choose to do so today, House Bill 597 rules, we will be in conformance with the legislation that was passed in the 21 session.
Mr. Chair, Mr. President, that's correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Further discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a question for staff. Do I have my dockets confused here? I thought that we were going to examine rulemaking that the state of Oregon had put in place. And is that this docket or was that a different docket?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fielder, I think we do have wires crossed here. The Oregon rules that we were referring to are incorporated into the proposal for intervention rulemaking. So that is a separate docket.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there further discussion of the motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just a clarification is that there seems to be a difference of opinion between the opinion given by Ms. Heim and that which is preceded the explanation of this, Ms. Gobert, and that is that the ETAC committee, is it strictly one to give advice, or does it have any real authority to direct any decision that ultimately that the utility will make? Could I get a clarification on that, please?
Who would like to respond to that, Ms. Gobert or Mr. Rosequist?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner O'Donnell. So first, I'll just report on what the statute requires. In terms of a advisory committee, a public utility shall maintain a broad-based advisory committee to review, evaluate, and make recommendations on technical, economic, and policy issues related to a utility's electric system. The committee may advise the utility on demand-side management, portfolio planning, and management and procurement completed in accordance with this part. So the rules as proposed require the utility to designate an advisory committee. As Haley mentioned, the utility is the one who designates the members of the advisory committee. The advisory committee has certain roles as defined in the statute. And that involves providing advice. So with respect to an RFP, the advisory committee may provide advice to the utility regarding how that RFP should be structured, or whether a third-party administrator should be used, how that third-party administrator should be selected. But ultimately, that is advice to the utility, and the utility will make the final decision, which will ultimately be reviewed by the commission in a subsequent proceeding.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very clear, and I understand that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Panocci?
Can you hear me okay, Mr. Chairman?
Can indeed, Commissioner.
I apologize to everyone for not being there in person, but my truck had frozen gel diesel fuel today. So my question goes to Will with a couple of follow-ups. Will, I've got a letter here in front of me from Representative Galloway, House District 24, which I got this morning and was able to get to you first thing. He's concerned that these rules will affect resource adequacy, making challenges for Northwest Energy and energy providers. Do you feel that's a fair concern, or do you feel that resource adequacy will not be affected?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Panocci, staff does not believe the rules as proposed interfere with the utilities' objectives and obligations to achieve resource adequacy. These rules are stronger than the rules that were under consideration back in July, in the sense that they require the utilities to conduct resource adequacy assessments. So if resource adequacy is a concern, then these rules are stronger than the prior version in terms of mandating the utilities conduct resource adequacy assessments. As for affordability, I would say that these rules are also stronger in the sense, as you heard from some of the public comments and Haley's presentation, the rules are intended to require certain competitive bidding procedures and evaluation procedures to instill confidence in prospective bidders that the process will be fair, transparent, objective. And that is intended to ensure that the least cost resources are selected. So as you're aware, we're getting a fair number of public comments now concerned with the utility rate increases. And today's planning and procurement activities are tomorrow's potential rate increases. So ensuring that the process is robustly competitive today can ensure that you can respond to constituents who are concerned about rate increases in the future, that you did everything you could to make sure that the rates are just and reasonable and no higher than necessary.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up, Commissioner Panocci.
So I received a phone call that suggested that if Northwestern Energy takes over the Tiber Reservoir generating station, that these rules would affect the process in doing that or prevent it from happening at all. What's your feelings there, Will?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Panocci, I struggle to see how the rules would present an impediment there. There are numerous ways that that resource could be acquired. You know, it could be bid into a future RFP process. to the extent that it presents itself as an opportunity resource. As Haley said, the rules recognize the carve out in the statute for opportunity resources, so that would not be an issue. Again, I struggle to see how these rules would prevent the acquisition of that resource, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up, Mr. Commissioner.
Reading directly from Representative Galloway's letter, he says that allowing potential bidders in the RFP to influence the RFP design is a gross conflict of interest beyond reason. The presence of this conflict undermines the integrity of the RFP and the purpose of HB 597 to create an objective and unbiased selection process for new energy resources. Do you feel his concern there has got any validity or absolutely not? What are your thoughts, Will?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Panocci, I guess the first thing I'd say is that Northwestern's current practice or previous practices in conducting RFPs has been to solicit the input of the potential bidders. And so I'm not sure that our rules are really doing anything greatly different than what Northwestern has done in the past. But beyond that, I guess I would say that it's important to recognize that the utilities are not necessarily neutral in this process. They themselves are self-interested stakeholders who may own resources or may have affiliates that bid resources into the RFP process. So I don't think it's, I guess I disagree that it's a conflict of interest. Again, the final decision on how the RFP is going to be issued comes down to the utility. These rules simply require an opportunity for all stakeholders, not just bidders, to weigh in on the structure of the RFP, how it's written, the proposed scoring criteria. And this is all in an effort to ensure that the utility considers various perspectives before it makes its decision, because at some point the utility is going to have to present its decision, defend its decision in front of the commission. And so it's in a way, it's designed to be a risk mitigation strategy for the utility so that it doesn't get caught off guard by some perspective that only shows up in a rate proceeding where a prudence determination, for example, is at stake.
Thank you for that answer, Will. I want everyone to understand that I believe that we need to generate more electricity in Montana than we do today. When we bring in power from out of state, we wind up paying a considerable amount more. I don't want to do anything that would cause a power company to not be able to get new resources, like opening a new hydroelectric facility or putting in a nuclear power plant or being able to add a turbine to a dam that doesn't currently have one. I don't want any obstacles there because we really need to try to produce more in Montana and be an energy exporter. This will have a direct effect on lowering the cost to the ratepayers. So I sure don't want to see that, but it sounds like Will's covered those concerns. So I'll support this today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Panocci. President Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Rosequist, I have a question for you, but before I do that, I just want to remind those listening today that the reason that we're here this morning and acting on this matter is because the 2019 Montana legislature passed House Bill 597, which required us to do rulemaking to implement that bill. And with that in mind, Mr. Rosequist, you touched on a point that I think needs further elucidation in this morning's session regarding the language of 597. You discussed, Mr. Rosequist, that there is a carve out, if you will, as you described it in House Bill 597 for opportunity resources. So I would like you, Mr. Rosequist, to explain to the public what that carve out is and a brief description of what an opportunity resource is. And I think that explanation will address Ms. Himes' portion of Ms. Himes' testimony. It's hilarious. Public comment this morning about her concerns and Northwest Energy's concerns about hindering utilities flexibility.
Mr. Chairman, President Brown. So I guess first, the statute defines opportunity resource fairly broadly. It's a resource that is unknown to the utility until it becomes known to the utility. And HB 597 explicitly says that a utility can acquire an opportunity resource outside of the competitive solicitation process. So if some resource becomes available to Northwestern, it wasn't previously aware that that resource existed. It may be an existing resource. It could be a new resource. And Northwestern is comfortable that it's cost effective, then it can go ahead and acquire that resource outside of a competitive solicitation process.
So following up on where I was going with this, you would agree with me that because House Bill 597 provides this carve out, utilities in Montana that are regulated by the Montana Public Service Commission will still have maximum, if you will, flexibility in obtaining opportunity resources. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rosequist.
Thank you, President Brown. Is there further discussion of the motion? Ms. Gobert?
Vice President Johnson, President Brown, I would also note, just like with any other rule, if a utility wanted to request a waiver of that rule to pursue, a resource without a competitive solicitation, it would have that opportunity to do so as well.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any other discussion motion, further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Was that Commissioner Fielder?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the extra time that we were able to take with this rulemaking. It has been complicated. It has been a real struggle to arrive at a reasonable conclusion. I'm still not fully comfortable with it, but it seems like we have arrived at a point where we've got the best possible scenario that we feel we can put forward under the law for this particular rulemaking process. So I would suggest that if there are, anyone listening or anyone interested that feels that this is, still very problematic in terms of disruption to the ability of energy utilities to be able to provide dispatchable power when it's needed, that that should be taken up through the legislative process, and we will we will have an opportunity to revisit the rule too if we find that we failed in some way, I'm sure. But for now, I think it's the best we could do, and I appreciate the extra effort that's been put into it and the extra time that's been taken to try to get this right.
Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Any further discussion from commissioners? Let me just briefly say that I think it is true that if the desire exists, you can what if the best idea in the world to death. And I do think that a number of the concerns that have been raised with regard to this current version of the rule fall into that what if category. I take frankly great comfort in the fact that these rules represent industry standards, that best practices that have been in place in states with which we have a great deal in common in terms of addressing the issues of resource adequacy and acquisition. So I'm very comfortable from that perspective. I also would say that I think the staff has done a tremendous job in terms of crafting a rule that clearly meets the plain language aspects of the legislation, and I think in cooperation with Senator-elect Zolnikoff in terms of meeting those aspects that have to do with legislative intent. There's no better source in terms of defining legislative intent than the sponsor of the bill. So I think on both those fronts, the staff has done really an excellent job. So I want to thank them. And if there's no further discussion of the motion, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Now, again, we are postponing docket 2022.09.085 Aquanet. That will be back on the agenda for the January 3rd meeting. Turning the floor now over to Commissioner Fielder to bring us to the next chapter in our strategic planning process. Commissioner Fielder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share screen. And you should have all received this in your packet. See if I've got this up. Okay. So in your packet, you received a series of charts in follow-up to our strategic planning meeting that we held on December 12th. And what I did was I prepared two sets of charts. The first one is just basically as we are currently, as we were structured the last time we approved an organizational chart. So this represents what's already in place. That's your page 3 in your packet. I am sharing screen. You should be able to hopefully see that up on the screen as well. And for those viewing online, you should be able to see that. So the first set of options that I put together, the option 1 charts, there's 3 charts, and they're very, very similar to what was presented at the strategic planning meeting on December 12th. So this first chart is unchanged. It shows the proposed use of the 31 FTE divided into the 4 divisions rather than 3 divisions. So there is an external affairs division in addition to the legal division, centralized services division, and the regulatory division. It does show 4 regulatory compliance specialists in 1 supervisor and 3 specialists over in the regulatory division, which represents that shift of moving the consumer assistance team out of the centralized services division and into the regulatory division, and combining those 3 people that are in consumer assistance program now with the 1 regulatory compliance specialist that's been working on mainly on transportation and assisting railway. So that there is a slight change to this. It just shows a stronger, more bold line in the chain of command between the commission president and the executive director, and then following downward from the executive director. That line is bold and thick from the executive director to the external affairs coordinator and to the business manager and the commission secretary, to represent that those are the primary areas of operation that executive director position would be supervising on a daily basis, whereas the chief legal counsel would be managing that division, and the regulatory division administrator would manage that division, and the supervision coming from the executive director would be at a lighter level there. So that represents basically what we've decided in the past, to have an executive director very focused on the internal operations, but also with the recent addition of having the executive director focused also on, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to move that, also focused on the external affairs and assisting with external affairs. The second slide or the second chart in this packet, these are option 1, basically is the same chart, but it just shows the representation of how the regulatory compliance unit would interact with the other units and shows their bullet pointed duties. The only change to this, there's 2 changes. Well, it's 1 change represented here, and that is the final bullet point on the bottom of the big yellow box shows that they would be assisting the legal division with document processing. And that was a point raised by our chief legal counsel during that December 12th meeting. And I just added the red dash line over to the legal division to represent that working relationship there. So the third chart in this option is this represents what's in the strategic plan that we adopted October 31st, as far as the added, where to put the added FTE if we're able to secure added FTE. And it adds those FTEs into this option 1 chart that shows the regulatory compliance people unit created in the regulatory division per the previous charts. So that chart is unchanged from what was presented last week during the strategic planning meeting. Okay, so the main change there is just that the regulatory compliance unit helps with the document processing. That's really the only significant change that was added to this series since we last met. But given some of the other input at that December 12th meeting, I created this second set of charts for your consideration also and discussion. And this one would bolster the personnel over in the external affairs unit to assist with the communications and public policy. And where we would get that person is there would only be 3 in the regulatory compliance thread instead of 4. So that would be a way to reallocate some of the staff resources to assist with the communications and public policy work. That was just based on, I created that option based on the feedback from commissioners at that last meeting. And if that were to be the route the commission wanted to go, I prepared a slight change to the added FTE allocation in this chart, which is on page 10. And that would show an additional FTE in the regulatory compliance unit so that they could get to their 4, and 1 additional in the external affairs, which would get them to 2. So ultimately, this gets both units to the same projected number of FTE. It just does it in a different way in terms of the timing. Okay. Are there any questions on those sets of options before I move into the actual organizational rule chart that's in this packet?
Questions from commissioners at this stage? I think you can proceed, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. So the last set of charts here are the administrative areas of operation. And the first one in that section is the chart that was created for our organizational rule last February when we updated our organizational rule. This was how we were structured at that time. This is what we adopted at that time. So this would need to be changed to reflect the prior charts, whichever option we go with, whether we go with the option 1 or option 2 or some other option right now. This chart would have to be updated into something more like this chart, which is the final one in your packet, which would show essentially the 4 divisions rather than the 3 divisions. So there would be an external affairs division added to the 3 divisions that we now have. And other than that, the duties of those managers are unchanged. This isn't intended to change the number of people in management or to, I don't show the business manager or the commission secretary on this chart or those positions. They are on the master chart, but Really, the only change here is in the structure of having the External Affairs Division be a unit, a division of its own. So what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, is I would like to adopt this chart here, the final one, number 13 today, so that we can prepare the necessary narrative to go into the organizational rule that accompanies that. And I would like us to adopt either the option 1 charts or the option 2 charts for the overall agency organization, if the commission is comfortable in doing that. And the main purpose for adopting a set today would be so that we could plan for those positions and move forward with any reclassification of staff that would need to be done with that consumer assistance program being melded into a regulatory compliance unit. I believe we have Will Rosequist and Tina Shorten and Lucas Hamilton available. We did not discuss the option 2 charts at the last strategic planning meeting because they were done after that meeting. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you'd like to hear from staff on whether this option 2 seems workable or not, but if you're willing to entertain those comments, I think it could be instructive for us.
Be happy to do that. We just worked down the line there, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I don't believe that I have any additional thoughts on the new option 2 charts. I think they primarily affect regulatory and the regulatory compliance specialists. So I would, of course, defer to other staff.
Ms. Shorten.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. I do have some concerns on option 2. It would put our division or our unit, I guess, staffed the way we have been with me plus 2 people when we were doing consumer assistance and public outreach and some of the other duties that we've been doing, but also adding all of the regulatory compliance duties, which was a full-time FTE. So I don't know that we would have enough bandwidth with just me plus 2 people to do all of the duties that we were doing with me plus 2, plus the duties that one other FTE was doing. So I do have some concerns about that. I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to adequately do our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosequist.
I would probably just echo what Tina said in terms of whether that would be sufficient resources, particularly given that we're short-staffed now and trying to fill those positions, and we'll have brand new people there that needing training in the near term. It would be easier to sort of make a call on this after having some people in those positions for a while and seeing what the workload looks like.
Thank you. Commissioners, comments on organizational chart for 31 FTEs under option 2. President Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if I have a comment. I have a question for Commissioner Fielding, if I may.
Please, I thought you were simply informing me.
Just following protocol. Commissioner Fielder, just a question. So, just for my own understanding, if we're going to move forward with adopting option 1 chart, if you will, are you moving not only the chart for the 31 staff FTE, which is what we are authorized by the legislature to have, but are you also proposing to move forward with the planned FTE allocation chart with a plan for 6 FTE?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, the set of option 1 charts includes the the 6 planned FTE, that just reflects what we adopted in our strategic plan. So it's just directly reflective of the 6 FTE that are identified as needed resources in our action plans within the strategic plan. It doesn't address prioritizing those positions or anything like that. It just reflects where they fall on the organizational chart, because the requests are in a narrative type of, or a bullet point narrative format within the strategic plan. And so the chart just reflects that plan.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that explanation, Commissioner Fielder. The way that I see this, if we move forward with adopting planned FTE allocation chart, it does not in any way have a binding effect, as I understand it, on our formal organizational rule, correct, Commissioner Fielder?
Correct. These organizational charts are not included in the organizational rule. The only organizational chart that's included in the organizational rule is the administrative areas of operation, which is the black and white diagram at the end of your packet, the back of your packet. So
then what I understand you're proposing today, just for my own clarification, is you're proposing a 2-step process where we would adopt proposed revised administrative organizational charts in one motion, and then either draft option 1 or option 2.
that's correct. The reason for that is when we rewrite or revise our organizational rule, it will have to reflect this updated structure. And so the starting point would be that chart, which is at the back of your packet, number 13, would be the new structure in the organizational rule. But I actually wanted to try to get the organizational rule draft redline to you today, but I was not able to because it's actually part of the blue book as well, and it's in the hands of the publisher right now going through edit. So I was going to let them finish their editing on our existing org rule as it applies, and then do some updates if we adopt a set of these organizational charts today for the full staffing plan, if you will, option 1 or option 2. Then if we adopt also this chart 13, it sets us on the way to make these changes and start getting the revisions into the proposed for the organizational rule as well. But the personnel chart, option 1 or option 2, are not going to be contained within the organizational rule. Just the descriptions of those work units and what they do would be within the organizational rule when we revise it.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Mr. Chairman, just a comment on planned FTE allocation option 1 with 6 FTE, if I may. Commissioner Fielder, as you noted, we did meet to discuss these charts, if you will. I think during that meeting and at that time, both the Vice President and I expressed concern about the planned FTE allocation option 1 6 FTE chart, wherein you have under the External Affairs Coordinator 2 positions, one defined as admin specialist resource adequacy, admin specialist regional planning, as separate FTE, if you will. I would just reiterate again the concern that the Vice President and I raised at that meeting, that it is not good public policy nor good direction for the agency to segregate those 2 positions as they go hand in hand in the duties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Fielder.
what I can do is, what we would need to do, I think, is to address that concern, if there's agreement from the commission, what we could do is amend our strategic plan for those 6 FTEs and combining that, that position. Right now, it's listed as 2 different people in the strategic plan because it's 2 different goal areas in the strategic plan. One goal area deals with resource adequacy and the other one well, I believe I'd have to go back and look, but I think what we would need to do is to amend our adopted strategic plan just to get that aligned. So there's really 3 documents that would be aligned. These sets of charts, the organizational rule, the strategic plan, and the blue book, they all interrelate and all would be affected. So once we have a decision, we can get them all aligned.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And I just would echo the President's concern about separating those 2 sets of responsibilities. Having done quite a bit of work over the last couple of years in those areas, I think they really are joined at the hip and need to be in one box. So I'm glad there's a way in which it appears we can accomplish that. The only other comment I would make, Commissioner Fielder, having to do with 31 FTE chart option 2, where we've added admin specialist for public policy under external affairs. I really feel, as I think all of you know, I've been a real strong advocate for beefing up this whole external affairs division within the commission. But I do think with the 31 FTE chart, moving one of the existing boxes under external affairs is frankly robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I'm not sure that it makes a whole lot of sense to create a possible problem in one area to solve a problem in another area. And we really, I think, need to be focusing on how we can at least achieve the acquisition of at least some of these additional yellow boxes that have been proposed. But my real concern is that we, as you suggested, make the changes necessary in the strategic plan to combine those responsibilities of resource adequacy and regional planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, what I will do is I will go ahead and make a motion. I feel like I can do that. If there's more discussion, we can have discussion. If you'd be willing to entertain a motion.
Absolutely. Please proceed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would move that the commission adopt option 1, charts 1 and 2. So those are page 5 and 6. And those that would not, I won't explain it right now. I move that we adopt option 1, charts 1 and 2, which are pages 5 and 6 in the packet, and also adopt the new administrative areas of operation chart, which is page 13 in the packet.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Been moved and seconded that we do what Commissioner Fielder moved to do. Is there discussion of that motion?
Mr. Chairman, what this would do is then leave the planned FTE chart off the table for right now, and we can go back and revisit that as part of the strategic plan itself. When that document needs to be amended, we can do it as soon as the commission would like, or we can defer that for a while as we continue to work through our needs.
Makes perfect sense. Is there further discussion of the motion? Further discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner Fielder. Now, President Brown has asked for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, when I was a kid, my mom used to watch Days of Our Lives, and I believe the opening of that TV show was something to the effect like through sand through the hourglass, so go the days of our lives, perhaps. But that was 40 some years ago. But I start with that opening because As you know, Mr. Vice President, time marches ever forward, and I am sorry to say that, but at the same time, pleased for you that your 8-year tenure on the Montana Public Service Commission will be coming to a close in early January. This will be our last business meeting for the year 2022, so I think it appropriate that we recognize you for the work and public service that you have given to the Public Service Commission, as well as the regulated utilities and the consumers and ratepayers for which the agency and those we regulate serve. You have served with distinction, which includes, of course, serving as the chairman of the Public Service Commission for 6 years. And then serving as vice president of the commission for the last 2 years. You have certainly been a leader on the commission in terms of advancing the commission's knowledge and work in the area of both national and regional planning and developments. Your knowledge of those areas has been very valuable to me for the last 2 years in learning about what's happening in the regional and national areas. That's very much appreciated. The loss of your knowledge on that will be a detriment to the agency moving forward, I believe. But I also want to thank you personally for the leadership and guidance that you've shown me for the last 2 years in helping me serve as president of the commission. As I've told you many times, I very much appreciate your steady hand, and you have a way of moderating events that could otherwise be problematic. And I think that's a testament to your leadership. And at this point, I'd like to recognize you to say a few words if you would like.
Mr. President, I appreciate those kind words. And I don't know that there's much more than I can say other than it truly has been a privilege and an honor to serve on this commission for the past 8 years. And I can honestly tell you that it is an experience that I will always remember and value, and that I would not trade for anything. So with that, I just thank you all for the opportunity. Okay, then with that.
No, not yet. Not so soon.
Oh, Commissioner Fielder.
Mr. Vice President, former Mr. Chairman, I too wish to thank you for your service to the commission. You have been steadfast over many years. And one thing that really stood out to me, besides your very deep knowledge of the subject matter that we deal with on a day-to-day basis with our regulatory matters, was when I did attend the NARUC Policy Summit last summer. I noticed the esteem with which the members of the National Association of Regulatory Commissioners held you. And that was very obvious that you were held in very high esteem by those commissioners there on a national level. So thank you for your many years of good service to the state of Montana.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that more than you know. Let's move on now to our final work session. This is having to do with personnel matters. And I am obliged to read this statement that the presiding officer of any meeting may close the meeting during the time discussion relates to a matter of individual privacy. And if the presiding officer determines the demands of individual privacy clearly exceed the merits of public disclosure. The discussion in this session will involve evaluation of job applicants and consideration of the appointment of one or more applicants to fill open positions within the agency. As such, I have determined that the privacy interests of the individuals which will be subject to the meeting outweigh the merits of public disclosure. Accordingly, as the presiding officer of this meeting, I am closing this meeting to the public. And with that, we will recess to the Commissioner Conference Room, and upon completion of this work session, this meeting of the Commission will be adjourned. Thank you.